I guess while we wait, how's y'all week been?
Oh, good. It's been crazy.
Girl,
Yeah, and then I got a sinus infection. I usually have once a year that I get a really, really bad sinus infection
Lord.
where the sinus medicine doesn't help. And apparently that was this week. So,
uh-oh.
yeah.
Yeah, it's that season. I'm hearing a lot of people talking about allergies and
Yeah. So I'm
yeah.
feeling so much better today going into the weekend. Still congested as you guys can hear. But but yeah. And then it's just been busy like with work that I think I have the same sentiments, Christina. But most of the days, like I don't know which day it is of the week most times. So
I was glad you told me because I was on the wrong calendar and everything. Like I was looking at my calendar on the wrong day, and
no,
then so luckily, Clonetta to the rescue.
yeah,
Had
it
your wait
just
this morning.
well, and it doesn't help either. Like I don't know. I have people globally I deal with, and then like I had a meeting with a gentleman the other day. So he was in Serbia, and so he was like a day ahead of me, and so
Mm.
that was a little confusing too. So
Oh wow,
yeah,
yeah, that'll throw you off.
yeah.
Definitely will. What about you, Adriana? How's your day? Or how?
It's been I'll say it's been very productive. I pretty much canceled a good bit of my call because, like, I had my son's fifth grade to sixth grade promotion earlier this week and prepping stuff. I said I was going to make my youngest teacher some goodies and stuff since his last day being in like preschool is next week. So just a lot of busyness, more so on the personal side than business side. But I was able to get in because to be featured in magazines. I had to get like my ad in and all that good stuff. So
Yay!
like little stuff.
Yay! Congrats.
Thank you, thank you.
That's always good.
Yeah, so I'm trying to find stuff that doesn't require me to post a whole bunch.
On Wednesday, I did a talk show. Actually, it's called Strictly
Ooh.
Business,
Yay!
Southern California Black Chamber of Commerce. And so I sat down with Rick Wallace, who is the chairman of the Southern California Black Chamber of Commerce, and that was a really good discussion. We talked about economic stability of minority communities and how small business owners are really the backbone of those communities, and how do we get Black and minority business owners or entrepreneurs to actually start business
Yeah.
climate, and then how do we help them scale and grow so that they're able to offer employment in their communities. And so it was a really good conversation. um, so yeah, you guys should go check it out if you, and it was really good. It was very informative. He gave me lots of ideas to start um, thinking about as I scale my businesses.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a good discussion. But this
That's
week has
awesome.
been crazy for me. Yeah, I was able to talk a lot about.
Uh-oh, I think you're going out, Christina.
Yeah.
Oh, did I?
I know it's so iffy being on LinkedIn. Like sometimes it works really well, and even for my end too. That's a little crazy, wonky.
It looks like we have someone joining us, Giovanna. Thank you for joining us this Friday.
Just get into my question. Let me make sure. Well, let's make sure Christina, Christina's in before I just like shoot off some more, ask more questions.
Oh, I'm here. Hopefully, you can hear me.
Okay, good. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, I guess we'll get into the actual conversation. I really love compliancy and everything just because it's needed, and I feel as though it's not. Gosh, like I just see so many different posts and just how people conduct business even locally, and it's just like I'm pretty sure this isn't legal, but a lot of people don't know about business compliance, so I'm really excited about this conversation.
Yeah, compliance is like really one of my consultancy. We actually specialize in compliance, employee relations as well. But also can be complicated and it can become nuanced at times. And so compliance is like one of those areas that you really want to have a person who is really versed
Yeah.
in means in order to help your organization navigate. And a lot of times that compliance is going to be that compliance is going to come through a lot of your HR functions. Um,
I think we lost you, Christina.
why? How? Like I don't understand.
It's funny. It's like it'll be really good, and then like the random last words or something like that will get cut off or just stop.
Really?
Yeah, I think you were like where it stopped. You were talking about how the compliance usually comes through your HR function.
It it for me to me it makes more sense and they're able to be more fully utilized when they're placed under the HR umbrella rather than under the operations umbrella because basically what compliance is, let's kind of start there. So compliance is your ability to adhere to your state and local and federal regulations, but compliance, which a lot of people forget, is compliance also is the ability to adhere to your own company policies. And so a lot of times what I find when I'm speaking with clients or I'm working with companies is that they're out of compliance with their own handbooks. They're out of compliance with their own processes and procedures that they have, their written processes and procedures. And that can become a problem for a company, especially when you find yourself in a situation where someone has filed a grievance and you go to do an investigation and kind of dissect what's happening. And the company has all of these written out procedures, but management and supervisors and operations have kind of started to do their own thing. That too can become a problem because your employee handbook or your employment manual is basically the document that you use that says this is how we govern our business. So if you're not governing your own business according to your own written documents, you're out of compliance with your own policies and procedures, and that really can become a problem. It causes a lot of risk, and you venture into areas where you become liable for certain things that are happening simply because you aren't following your own written processes and procedures. So, it,
Yeah, and I think it's been interesting, and I've been shocked over the last couple years just at how lax people have been and companies have been with that compliance and the lack of understanding, even from those in our space and in the HR space, with
oh
just
yeah,
how important the compliance piece is to businesses. And, as of late, especially, I found in myself reminding folks of the negative implications and really serious implications that can occur from not adhering to that compliance. I think that, people forget, um, especially because their vantage point with HR may be one of more tactical and administrative. But a lot of times, that compliance piece helps keeps things in order. It helps keep the litigation down which impacts cost to a company, but also it can help keep some leaders from going to jail, just to put it plainly and simply. And I think that there's just, I don't know, it's like the awareness of that has escaped, and
Yeah.
it's just not at the forefront of people's minds, and so they let things slip.
Yeah. I think one of the ways that I like to mitigate that and kind of combat that is I have an actual training that I do for managers and supervisors. And what that training does, it's called
Okay, we lost the at right where you were gonna say the training.
I wonder if I need to restart my computer. But what I was saying is that so the training that I do is called protecting your personal liability. And it's important for managers and supervisors to understand that they do have some personal liability as they conduct business as an agent of the company. Because a lot of our labor laws and the labor compliance deals with what are considered civil torts. And so you want to be careful about infringing on people's actual rights, which is what those mandates are. They spell out to people what their rights are, right? So one of the areas that becomes really tricky is your leave administration and your compensation strategies, or how you're compensating your employees. Um, Other areas are like discrimination, disability, how you're accommodating those with disabilities, right? When you infringe or you violate people's laws, and you're working as an agent of the company, not only does the company become liable, but in some situations, you as the agent can become liable as well. And one of the scary things about that in California, I work out of California, is that we have seen an uptick in your frontline managers and supervisors being named personally in lawsuits, also when people file lawsuits against their companies.
Hmm.
And a lot of people, a lot of managers, a lot of frontline supervisors, they don't really take into that account that, if you infringe on somebody's employment rights, not only can they sue the company, but they can sue you too as well. And then hopefully you want to make sure that your company has the right insurances in place, where they're able to kind of protect you a little bit as well. But yeah, you can be sued as a manager.
Yeah, and I think that's key. Like, I'm glad you bring that up because I have always been on top of that. The whole indemnification policies and
Mhm.
understanding how much coverage the companies have had. Usually, like larger companies, they may have like $1 million, right? And so you would be surprised the number of people in HR as well as other functions that they have no knowledge, even around like the indemnification clauses and things. I recall a time joining an organization, a global organization, in like an executive HR director role, and I asked about their indemnification, clause and how much coverage, I had, and they were confused. They had to go research, and
Oh
basically, I
no!
found they did not have such
Oh
things
no!
set up. And so I think, especially like when you're in like a legal role, especially if you're getting into those executive ranks, like you need to ask. And I would even implore to you, like, even as you're like interviewing for these companies, you need to know and understand.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
do they have these things set up? And then, and if they don't, it gives you an opportunity to really share your knowledge to be able to expand their minds and, kind of walk them through what it is and why it's important that they have these things set up. But you do have, and I think that's why sometimes, again, in HR, we see both sides. Sometimes we see managers that are being a little reckless, and sometimes that may be why, because they don't understand. Like, they can personally be named in some of these lawsuits, and when that occurs, that's when your house is up for grabs. Your, savings, and the wealth building that you have been doing and planning is up for grabs. So you want to make sure that you are with an organization that has has a clause to protect you in the case that you are personally named in a lawsuit. It covers you for a certain amount. That if again, if that lawsuit is successful and there's a judgment against you, that they would pay out a certain amount. And so that's something I think to look into, and definitely a conversation to have with some of your leaders, that might help them police themselves, where they may want to go rogue or not, follow policies or cut corners. I've
Right.
had to use that card a time
Oh
or
yeah,
two.
not not just I think it's important too that you're mentioning that, because this is a reason. This is another reason why you want to, as early as possible, when situations start to arise, include your HR um, person, your HR representative, your HR professional in those conversations and in those situations that are unfolding, because they're the person who is going to be able to give you the best guidance on how to navigate that situation. And a lot of times, what you find is managers and supervisors who don't reach out for guidance because they think they have it, and really, sometimes what makes sense, common sense wise, doesn't make sense from a compliance standpoint. And so, part of compliance also includes the different precedents that your company is setting based on the decisions that they're making. That also becomes a part of your compliance, and that also becomes how you are able to manage and mitigate some of your risks, is by saying, hey, as a company, this is what we have done in the past for similar situations. You begin to set a pattern, and when you shift from that pattern is where scrutiny comes. And so you want to always kind of have your HR representative, or whoever your compliance officer or compliance person who has compliance responsibility within your organization, you want to bring them in as soon as possible, so that they're able to help navigate, what's happening.
No, absolutely. And I guess, we have a few more guests that have joined us. Thank you guys for joining us. Um, and, before we get too far, because I know we just jumped into things, I would be remiss to not share with you guys my personal nickname for Christina is the compliance queen. And so she truly is, skilled and knowledgeable in the area of compliance. And so, um, again, like a lot of this information, unfortunately, folks get thrown into jobs. They're so excited to just jump in and get started. And, sometimes these conversations are missed. And so you don't know what you don't know. So I'm glad, for those of you that are joining us today and that we're actually able to talk about this subject. We'll be sharing it on, our different platforms as well, just to kind of spread the word and knowledge around it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Lynetta. I actually love compliance. I'm one of those HR nerds that likes to sit and read the white papers, and I'll sit and read through full, like judgments or of different types of compliance um, pieces of material, and I like it. I enjoy reading it. I enjoy reading the reasoning behind the administrative judges and why they've made decisions the way that they've made decisions. And so it's really helped me to be able to get a full understanding of a lot of what regulates or governs the employee employer relationship. And so that's kind of the advantage of having not just an HR consultant, but an HR professional within your organization, is that a lot of times they are well versed in those things because they are reading those white papers, they are reading, getting those alerts that come through the EEOC or the DIR, where certain judgments have been made. Because what's interesting about your labor laws and your labor mandates is that those really set the social climate for that county, that state, that community, right? So what your laws are basically, what those laws and mandates are basically saying is that as a society or as a county or as a state, we have decided this is how we want our people to be treated. This is how we want to govern what is happening in the confines of our jurisdiction. And so it's important for leaders and organizational developers to understand what those are and how they apply to what your operations are. I think we talked last time, and one of the things that I mentioned is that it's really hard sometimes to determine, um, to look at a situation that's unfolding in the workplace and then figure out what's the best strategy or the best way to approach it so that you remain in an area of compliance, or you remain in the legal parameters that are set for you. And that's not easy to do. It's not easy to look at a situation that's unfolding and then try to figure out, okay, how do we stay in compliance here? It's becomes difficult sometimes.
No, absolutely. And I'm curious for you, Adriana, on your end, as you're going in and working with these companies and helping them set up their processes, have there been times where you've been working with someone and you're like, ooh, I don't know, that doesn't look right? And you kind of question.
Yeah, so that definitely happens a lot. So like I work a lot with like community leaders and stuff, and a lot of times I'll go through, I'm just kind of looking like this doesn't seem exactly right, but I was like, I look up things for compliance, but that's not my industry. So I usually tell them that you may want to double check with an HR professional. I'm like, yeah, it has happened, but that's why I started being a little proactive and being like, hey, like before we do this, sit down with this HR professional I know or someone locally that can help with this because this doesn't this does not look right. And honestly, that leads me to like a question I have too. But before I ask the question, I do want to say thank you guys for tuning in. And if you guys below that are listening want to come up here and tell any stories of your own or have any tips, you work in this industry, feel free to come on up. We like to share the stage. We don't want to hog it up. And my question when it comes to this, especially for smaller businesses, is there a way for them to kind of be proactive when it comes to making sure they stay compliant? Just because a lot of times people will come up with like these policies and stuff, and then like luckily they'll hire me to someone to come through and I can kind of like look things up. But is there a way or something you recommend or you ladies recommend that they should be doing or we should be doing more of to stay compliant? Because this honestly is a huge issue.
Yeah, I think they need the compliance queen or the HR whisperer on hand.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I was
They
going to say
need an
that too.
HR professional, right? It doesn't have to be
Yeah.
us, but yeah. Like most people, small businesses, they know they need an accountant. They know they need to set up payroll, and a lot of times they'll get an employment attorney. But oftentimes, like that employment attorney may not, um, like regularly, like just send out updates on the changes with employment laws and things like that. Um, and so I think there's a miss of the need to have like that HR expertise on hand. I think we've all seen it. We've all worked with folks where, they have their spouse, right? Usually the wife, she's HR, or they choose an office manager or someone else, that has a completely different job, and they're like, we'll have you do the HR functions, and that's where usually they start to get in trouble because you don't know what you just don't know.
Working with the company, and they actually hired a development consultant. So this person's job was to help them to develop their organization and to, venture into different arenas like adding products and that kind of thing. And I think it's great when you work with those type of consultants. However, you want to keep in mind that they may not necessarily be versed in your compliance areas. And so you want to make sure that the strategy that they're developing for you is actually going to work from a labor standpoint. Clonetta touched on something that's really important, which is that a lot of times they hire lawyers, right? Lawyers are going to tell you whether or not they're going to be able to defend what you're doing. And they're going to be able to give you guidance on what, they suggest you should or shouldn't do. But a lot of times they aren't in the weeds of the day to day. And so they aren't able to actually give you as much data evidence and guidance as an HR person would be able to. HR is more about mitigating risk and liability. When you get to your attorney side, you're looking at more at how can we defend this, or what should we be doing at this point. So a lot of times, by the time you get to the lawyer, it's already kind of blown up in your hands. And so I think that it's important that as small businesses begin to open, that they really look at the compliance part first and bring in someone that can help you with that. The law, because we're in the United States, as an entrepreneur, you're able to open a business, and we have that right to do that. And so I always remind business owners that you don't have to know everything. It's probably best that you don't know everything, but you do have to put people in place that know what you don't know, in order to protect you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, like, it's not the end of the world. Like, I live by the belief that there's a solution to everything. Sometimes that solution is to just walk away, or shut things down. But there's always a solution to everything. So again, like, if you do find that there are some compliance issues, it's not the end of the world. The important thing is to get people that are knowledgeable and equipped to be able to help you navigate through it and put the right processes in place.
Sorry, I'm walking around with my son at the same time. I appreciate you ladies' advice around that. So I have another question. So, what was I about to ask?
To look into, breakdown of company cultures. A lot of what I find is that the leaders are not using the documents that have been created to actually help them navigate. And so your HR manual should be like your blueprint, so that if you have an issue, whatever that issue is, you should be able to pull up your HR manual, and there should be guidelines in there for you based on whatever the topic is. And if you don't have the ability to do that with your HR manual, because that's where a lot of your compliance is located, then you probably need to revamp or redo your handbook. So what I tell leaders is, when you have an issue or an employee that comes to you with an issue, before you even start talking, pull out your HR manual and see what it says. And then see if what you were thinking, or what the place that you wanted to go, see how that lines up with what's actually in your written documents. That's one of the best ways that managers and supervisors can govern themselves, is by using the documents that are created for them. Now, if you don't have documents for you to look at, that's a whole problem in itself. But you should have documents that are able to guide you through these things.
Yeah, and I mean, and we say that, and I see Adriana with the laughing emoji, but especially for small businesses just starting out, a lot of times they don't have any documents in place, and it's astonishing. They just start, I call it, they just start doing. They get to a point where they need help, and so they're like, you know what, I need to hire someone. And so you find out you know what, they don't even have like an employment contract or an agreement, you know, if the person's a 1099. And that is just scary to me. Like they just start doing and they're risking it all.
It's not funny, but it's funny. But yeah, it's risky. I was telling Wallace when I was on Strictly Business that it's risky business when you go out there and you start. I love the entrepreneurial spirit. I love it. People have beautiful ideas that they're able to bring to fruition. But you also want to make sure that your ideas and how you want to lead your company, you know, kind of jive with the laws that govern you and the governing agencies, right? You have so many different, you have the OSHA, and then you have, the DIR, and then you have the EEOC, and then you have, so many different governing bodies that all have a say in how you run your business. And so they actually become like partners with you in your business because they're telling you you can do this, you can't do this. And so it becomes really important.
Yeah, it does. It really does.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that you find yourself faced with, Juanetta, with your clients? Let's hear some. I want to hear a story. I want to hear.
Oh goodness. Um, well, again, like just the one with like not having agreements and things in place when people are just out here doing, and you would be astonished. Like some of these people, are considered like highly intelligent, right? Like in the finance world, they're advising people on how to invest in their monies and things like that. But they're just out here doing. So, I've been able to step in and put together like some agreements. In one case that I'm thinking of, it was contractual because they weren't bringing the individual on as a W-2, but they were 1099 for them. And so that was key. The other thing, too, like I remember this particular individual, like a lot of folks, when they're just starting out, like they don't do background checks. And I think they don't know, like, background checks really aren't that expensive. And especially, like, depending on the industry that you're in, like if you're in, like, the financial services industry, you probably do want to go ahead and do that. And I mean, I have networks and contacts where, we can get you a background check for less than $50, right? I wouldn't say even around like 30 or so. And, and it's important to have those things in place and to make sure that you have that stuff set up. But no, I've seen horror stories where, um, things have just gotten so out of whack. Sometimes merely by growth, and I think you can appreciate this, Adriana. I remember having a client who was expanding. They had a couple stores. It was a franchise, and each location had a separate employee handbook. And this is where, again, it gets sticky, right? Because now there's a lot of PEOs out there. A lot of folks think they can, use a DIY, do-it-yourself model of HR, which is not good. It's just not good. And people get themselves in trouble because an ADP or the payroll platform they're using happens to have an HR tab now, and so they're pointing and clicking. And so in that pointing and clicking, I discovered like each location had a separate employee handbook. There were some like policies, and for the one location that weren't in the other, you know. And that was an issue because now, again, you're under the same organization, so now you're creating a situation where employees can be treated differently, but also from a functionality standpoint, you had like your leadership or management staff that was tasked with traveling to the different locations and engaging with employees and coaching and hiring or firing or writing them up. And so now they're tasked with having to check, the different handbooks because the policies are different. So that was one of the things we came in and did is I took a look at the handbook and then we streamlined it and just made sure that it lined up, and for the future locations, set the expectation that we'll use this will be our template for, all future locations that you open, right? So that there's synergies, across your entire organization, and we are creating a culture for fairness. Um, so it can be that lax, but then I've also seen, things with larger companies where you have even, and this wasn't too far. This was actually an HR buddy of mine. This wasn't my person, but executives, like, you get perks, right? So you get your company credit card and everything. And so this one executive took his family, like, to Disney World or whatever, like on the company
Oh
credit
man.
card.
Oh
And which
Jesus.
was crazy because, again, like at the salary this person was at, like, it's not like they couldn't afford it, right, on their own. But it was just, again, like, just pushing the envelope and feeling like you could get away with it. And the reality is, this individual, this probably wasn't the first time, right? This was just like the time that they got caught. They probably had started doing like little things. And I mean, I've had where I've caught folks like, sometimes they've said it's been accidents where they're putting like groceries on their company, credit card and stuff like that. But but yeah, I think, again, like there needs to be those checks and balances, right? Like you should have somebody that's reconciling those statements and taking a look to make sure like the charges are appropriate. And I think, many of you know if you've worked in these corporations, there usually is a process and a system where the manager has to go through and approve like the charges on that company credit card. So again, that's another, example where there was lax in the compliance piece of it. You know, the managers just clicking approve and everything, and not really looking to see whether or not like these charges are legit. I know, um, there was an individual that, like, not even management or executive level in the tech space that just, again, I don't want to pick on the generations, but I'm telling you, some of these younger generations, they just have a different thought process.
Oh
But
God. Yeah.
this was just, an employee, like not an executive or anything, but he was flying himself everywhere first class. And then when he'd go to dinner,
I
he
heard
would
that.
buy bottles. Like, and I know I shouldn't laugh, but this is the, like HR humor, right? Because some of the stuff you have to laugh at. Like he
Right.
would go, like when he was on business travel out to dinner, he was buying bottles. And it was just like,
Heard that,
in
sir.
what world, in what universe do you think this is okay?
I love that. That's hilarious. I love it.
Yeah, it just, so some of this stuff can get really, really wild. I remember I had one time too, this was some years ago. And if my HR friend's listening, he's going to crack up because we had a time with this. One of our employees who had a corporate card, she wasn't in management, she actually like started living at the embassy suites. Y'all know I'm in Michigan, in Southfield, Michigan. And then like they couldn't, like she became a squatter because like of course like when we found out we're like where are these charges coming in? And so when we cut the card off, like she became a squatter, like would not leave. It was a whole mess.
Oh
I would
wow.
have the manager at Embassy Suites would call me like a couple times a week, and because they needed payment, right? And they were worried, and we just, again, at the time the person also was in trouble, because of, of course, misuse of the company credit card, but they had some other like performance issues and things that were going on. So we were trying to get a hold of them too, but it was just it was a mess. It really was a mess. Um, just kind of going through that process. But again, like, you will have people that will push the limits and really like take things far. So it's important to have those strict processes and policies in place, so that you can address things appropriately, but more importantly, you're addressing them consistently, across the board, so you're not adversely impacting anyone.
Hmm. Yeah, that's why I think the consistency across the board is so important because that's where your discrimination suits, take life. Anytime you have managers and supervisors and frontline.
Oh, Christina.
Did I go out again?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right
Am I
at
back?
the managers and front line.
Okay. They
I
are
know.
kind of doing their own thing. It really brings light, or it takes, it causes those discrimination suits.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
that's
we
what
lost
gets
right
you
at
in.
discrimination.
Yeah, and that's what's scary about not having, leadership in the area of compliance, right? I know that for me, I want to share one situation that I dealt with.
Okay. We lost you for a bit.
Yeah.
And I'm on the edge of my seat now.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I wish I knew what was happening with my. But anyway, what I was explaining. His shift was changed. And in speaking with the manager and trying to figure out why that shift was changed, his reasoning was that because the gentleman was older, he was more responsible and he was more dependable, and they needed someone to be there early in the morning. And so that was one of the reasons that he decided to switch this guy's shift. And then another thing that he said was, it gets really hot. I'm in California, and so midday is when your heat picks up. And
Hmm.
so he was concerned about the gentleman being in the heat, in that midday period. So he actually thought that he was doing a good thing. And when you just hear it and you listen to it, you're like, okay, yeah, you're looking out for him, right? The
Hmm.
problem with that is that you're making this determination based on this guy's age, and he's telling you, I don't necessarily want to work at 6 a.m. And so that actually ended up in a lawsuit, where after this guy complained for some time, and I couldn't get the operations manager to kind of see the reasoning behind it, and this guy filed a lawsuit and he won. You know, a good little chunk. And it was simply because it was a violation of, it was ageism. And so that's what I mean by being able to apply the mandate to real life work scenarios. Um,
Yeah.
that it was unfortunate, but he did violate that guy's rights.
No, no, that is important. That is
Wow.
so important. Again, it can be just those little things, right? That people think they're helping out, and you know, and they're not. And sometimes it's not always like egregious. There are times where people are doing things really intentional, and sometimes it's, the intent versus impact. Someone thinks that sometimes they're doing too much, right? They think that they're helping out, like in this scenario, and you haven't even had the conversation with the guy to understand if the heat was an issue for him, and
Right.
you just decided and changed the schedule. That's yeah, that's where people
Yeah,
get into trouble.
he was not happy, and I tried as best as I could to explain to them, and that's where it becomes difficult for HR people. Like, a lot of times people are like, oh, we don't like HR, and HR is only for the company,
Yeah,
and this and that. And it really makes me sad because you don't know employees and workers, the conversations that we've had with leaders, the back and forth that we've had, the Kinetic can
exactly.
tell you, the strategies that we've had where we're actually advocating on your behalf. And a lot of times, based on where you're positioned in the organizational structure, a lot of times you don't have the influence that you should have to be able to make decisions and have them just be finalized.
Yeah,
Um, and that's kind of the struggle and the bad rap that HR gets, is because you don't see the back workings. You don't see the behind the door or behind the veil type of work that's done on the back end. And so, for my HR people out there, I just want you to know that, I feel you. Keep trying to fight the good fight and do what you can do. And it's important that owners, business owners, get strong HR professionals and leaders that are in the organization that can guide them, and then also support them in their efforts.
yeah. And also I'm gonna do a quick plug because this is a niche I kind of find myself in. Um, like even so, the scenario like you just mentioned, because I've been kind of in that world where unfortunately the route I took, which maybe why look, part of why it was best for me to be on my own and have my own business, because I
Right,
have gone to war, right, to
right,
stand up for, like, if things are right, um, right is right and wrong is wrong, and everyone's not going to do that, or that they're not able to, um, and so one of the things is an encouragement, like for those folks that are, in those HR roles. And like I said, I get it. Like as Christina mentioned, like depending on your reporting relationship, sometimes you might not want to push as hard because it could impact your, career trajectory or what have you. But that's also an advantage of being able to have like an outsource, like a fractional expertise or a consulting firm come in. And I love the space that I'm able to operate in now, like in the impact that I'm able to have, right, as a consultant, because I'm a hired resource. I'm not in their org chart, necessarily reporting to anyone. And so I'm able to give sometimes the tough messages, right?
hmm
And so usually with HR leaders, um, that's why when folks ask, like, who would you like to be introduced to? It's the HR leaders, right? Those senior HR VPs, the SROs, or CEOs, right? Because they get it, they understand, and they understand a lot of times we can come in to be an ally to them to help push certain initiatives along. Um, and that's been, like I said, a benefit that I've been able to, help in a capacity that I've been able to serve. So
That was awesome.
actually. I've actually witnessed that in my own consultancy. It's just how much easier it is to kind of, give advice, strategies for dealing with certain things, and how much more readily accepted it is as
hmm
a consultant rather than an inside employee. It's absolutely true because, you start dealing with different dynamics, and you start dealing with different, egos and all that other kind of stuff when you're dealing from an internal place. Whereas when you're external, you have no dog in the fight other than I'm here to help you. And so a lot of times, I mean, it would kind of be crazy to have a consultant and you just not adhering or listening or agreeing with what they're saying.
yeah.
It's kind of like defeating your own purpose. So,
Yeah.
It's
No,
definitely easier to
absolutely.
navigate from the outside in, for sure.
Yeah. No, definitely. Definitely. There's definitely advantages to it. You know,
will say
sometimes
that
we can
company that
deliver the tough messages.
I will say that company that ended up getting sued and losing that lawsuit, they started listening to me. Like it no longer was a problem. The owner would defer everything to me because before that lawsuit came, I was raising flags, raising the whistle, and a lot of times what happens is companies think, hey, and so they think they don't have to worry about someone filing a grievance. And it's not until you get that grievance that you understand that they will sue you. They will go to the EEOC. That's why you're required to have all those postings around your organization telling people what to do if they're having an issue. Is because a lot of times people will utilize those avenues, and companies are kind of shocked when they do. I tell people all the time, like, I can file an EEOC complaint right now and I don't have to quit my job. People do not have to quit their jobs to file
Yeah.
the things that a lot of people miss. I can go to the labor commissioner right now and then go to work in an hour because they don't have to quit their jobs to file a grievance. And I think a lot of leaders don't understand that, and they think, well, the employee's still coming to work every day, even though they're disgruntled, even though they're dissatisfied. They think they're protected because the person is still coming to work every day. They can file a suit against you. They can file a claim against you and still come to work. They're not required to quit.
Trust me, I know.
And then how uncomfortable does the workplace become when you're, navigating the EEOC complaint and the person is standing in your business, on the clock and you're paying them? Then that becomes a really
Yeah.
sticky situation.
Yeah, I have a client now. I almost wonder if the EEOC doesn't have an office right there at the place. They've got so many. Boy,
Right. Just set up camp right here.
yeah, look.
Yeah, people don't have to quit to file a grievance. They don't
Yeah,
have to sue you at all. No.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So I don't know, like, I know we're close on time. I don't know if any of the guests want to come up and share some of their experiences or thoughts around compliance or things that they've dealt with in the past.
I do have one last question just in case no one decides to come up. So, first of all, thank you, ladies, so much because this is out of my realm. So, I'm glad y'all both were able to come on and give us all these tips and stories and stuff because, like I said, compliance is. Definitely needs to be a better job with compliance. But do you guys have any like are there any regulations that businesses should be aware of that may be changing soon or anything that we should know? Just kind of like leaving notes that people should know.
Oh my goodness.
And that's probably a lot,
No,
but
we just had so many changes recently, right, Conetta? That I hope not. I know that in
Yeah.
California, what's coming up in July for my California people is you want to make sure that you have that workplace violence plan in place, where you're
Uh oh, you just went out. The workplace violence in
in my
place.
back. Can you hear me now?
yes, you're good.
Okay. So in July, that mandate is being enacted. It'll be enforceable in July for your California employers, and it has to do with preventing workplace violence. So that's internal threats as well as external threats. The state has really broadened the responsibilities of the employer in those areas, and so you want to make sure that you have your preventative plan in place by July. I believe it's like July 17th or somewhere around there. But no, we
And
just had so many changes. I mean,
yeah,
this,
and we've touched on them like over the weeks. Like the non-compete. The ban on the non-compete. The changes with the guidance on W-2 versus 1099. You want to stay abreast to, like, there's been some rulings or changes that even President Biden has issued for government employees in their use of AI technology. So if you work with individuals in that space in the government entities, you want to make sure that you're abreast of that. I think that one just came out a week or two ago. Like you said, this year, boy, they've been like just hitting us hard. It's like at least once a month there's some new change or something like that that comes out. And so again, you want to stay on top of those things, and you want to make sure that you're compliant, like the CTA, the Corporate Transparency Act, for again all business owners. Um, you want to make sure that you're aware of that and the requirements. Um, if you, for those that started businesses like before this year, you have till December to actually file your paperwork. But I know I belong to some other communities. I know the sentiment, specifically in one, a lot of the folks are waiting because there's different lawsuits and things that are going on. So they're waiting to see if it's reversed, if that ruling is reversed or what have you. But yeah, there's just so many things to keep on top of, and and like the landscape is ever changing, and so make sure that you have the right expert that can help guide you and navigate you through those changes.
Absolutely.
That was helpful. Thank you, ladies. Well, I guess because it's a little after 11, like I said, I like to hold everybody past 1 hour. So I guess this will be it. Thank you again, you guys, for talking. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks. I have not decided the topic yet, but we'll figure it out. But keep an eye out for another topic and the event coming out soon.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
You're
Have a
welcome. Bye,
great
y'all.
holiday weekend.
Alrighty. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye.